Welcome to the Beacon Podcast. Deborah Jane East and Ari Kopel are voices in the wilderness for positive change and a better future. Thank you for listening. And now, here are your hosts.
This is the Beacon Podcast, and I'm Deborah Jane East, and my co-host Ari Kopel is here. How are you doing today, Ari?
I am as good as I can be.
Me too. We were
Right?
just talking about that. It's
Yeah.
been a hectic week, hasn't it?
It sure has.
Well, this is about our 11th show, and we haven't run out of topics yet, so I think we're doing good. And we have plenty more on the menu for days ahead. We just every week we say, "Oh, this would be a good topic. That would be a good topic." So that's good. We have plenty of stuff to talk about. But first, let's do a little update on our last show about censorship. I'm dying for you to just speak about this because our show was about censorship.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, it was censored on a platform we won't mention, but its initials are YT.
That's right.
But Ari, tell them what they said about that last podcast and what they ended up doing in the end, because it was just really a weird message they sent you.
Yeah. So the original, the first one before the last one, can't remember what we were talking about, probably the environment or something. That one took off. Yeah, they took off altogether. So they removed it and they gave me a strike. And I think you have 3 strikes and you're out. You know, they basically take down your channel. So the last one, I think we were a little bit, at least I was more careful in not mentioning certain trigger words, kind of, walking around it, describing what I'm trying to say as opposed to actually naming it, because they have some kind of like AI. And then they also have people, Deb, believe it or not, actually go through. Yeah. So in case the AI misses it, I think then they have their goons that scrub the thing too, to, make sure that you're not, doing things that are against their policies. But anyway, what happened was that they told me that I was going to be limited in my monetization of that show because, hey, I don't work. Okay. This is what I do full time. And so I'm monetizing as much as I can, and so they told me that I couldn't monetize, that yes, I could air it, but I couldn't monetize. And so I fought it. I said, well, I don't understand what there's nothing there that that is against your policies or against your rules. So it took them about 7 days or maybe a little bit less. And they came back and said, oh, you're fully monetized now. So, sometimes you do have to question them because otherwise they totally, don't want the message going out, regardless of whether you're using trigger words or not. So that's the story. I ended up getting monetized.
Well, they like to be the big bully or big brother, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
But if people don't speak up, then
Yes.
you'll never know.
Never know.
It was very good of you to call them out. So I just thought that was funny. Our show on censorship was censored.
Censored.
I mean, good Lord. But today, Ari is going to start out this show on a topic that a lot of people don't know a lot about, and it's terraforming. And for all of you who have never heard that word before, Ari, why don't you start by giving us a definition, and then you can go in and talk about what you found out about this topic.
Yeah. So terraforming, it's like another word for it is terror forming, in my opinion, right?
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, it's just a changing something that we already know and are familiar with, which is our planet. But a definition that I believe I got it from earth.com. I'm not really 100% sure, but it says terraforming, literally earth shaping is what it is the process of modifying a planet, moon, or other body to a more habitable atmosphere, temperature, or ecology. So basically, it's getting a world, right? Whether it's an asteroid, a moon, whatever, to be friendly to humans, because terra has to do with the word tierra in Spanish, which is earth, which is like soil. Okay. So that is basically to accommodate human beings. However, it could also be used for, an alien life form doing the same for themselves. Of course, we don't know what they call their planet or their world, but let's say alien forming would be an equivalent. Something alien would be changing our world to fit their biology or their needs.
Oh, that's
And
good. I like that. That made it very simple. I'm glad you
yeah,
said that.
yeah, yeah. So that's pretty much what that is. It's again changing the planet to meet the needs of whomever is conquering that planet or needing to use that planet. So if we were to go to Jupiter or a different world, then we would terraform to make it like Earth. Giving it an atmosphere, giving it maybe oceans or whatever it is in order to be able to breathe that air, to be able to grow life forms in there that are friendly to human beings. So that's what that is. Now, one way that they do that, and they are doing that now on the planet, which is kind of strange because why would we be terraforming our planet? Our planet
Right.
is already, friendly to us. That's why we've been on it for so many millions of years. So why would, humanity need to terraform anything? And it kind of shows you that it's not humanity doing it. If something is trying to change the way that that planet is functioning, then there's something else there. There's a different agenda. So they're using this thing called geoengineering. And at one point in time, we had called it chemtrailing or chemtrails. Um, a lot of fact checkers and even the government and scientists and all would come out and debunk it. They would call all those people using that word chemtrail. They would use it, call us conspiracy theorists, crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
Yep.
Came up with the same word. Yeah, we were all insane, right? But now, so the term is morphed into geoengineering because it's more scientific, because they're, engineering the geography or the world. Why? Because they've come up with this concept called global warming that has to be addressed, because God forbid we only had 12 years to live, and that was like 20 years ago.
I know.
So they're using that as like the next fear-demic, right? It's no longer a virus, but more like a fear of the world, not being around because it's going to go up on, in fire or something. We're not going to be able to sustain it. But the geoengineering itself is causing the situation, is causing, the climate change, and they're causing the greenhouse effect and making the planet warmer and hotter and just not sustainable. Does that make sense so far?
Oh,
Or
yes, it does. It
okay.
totally makes sense. And it's also a big money pit too.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, every time you go to Congress, someone is asking for a million here, several million, a billion here for
Mm-hmm.
climate change things that we don't need and haven't been proven to be effective. In fact, it's usually to the negative.
Exactly. Yeah. For example, just give you an example. I mean, just something as commonplace these days, like solar panels. So solar panels, what a great idea. However, if you're dimming the sun, which is what's happening with this geoengineering stuff, that they're spraying all kinds of chemicals and particles in the air that is blocking the sun to get to the surface. Why? Because they're stating that, by doing that, they're going to cool the planet, because the planet it's just going off the charts in terms of, climate. And that's what they're stating, of course, but we know that that's not the case. And I can tell you a little bit as an aside why that's not the case. But so what they're doing is that they're creating the sun dimming. And so the solar panels, how do you have electricity, right, that is being acquired from the sun if there's no sun? It doesn't
A
make it.
big red flag right there, Ari.
Right, right. And you're spending, I don't know how much these things are. I mean, they're a lot. I mean, back in the day when I was thinking about possibly getting some of these solar panels for the house, They were 30,000 back then, and we're talking about maybe 15 years ago. I don't know what they are now.
Oh, wow.
But it doesn't make any sense and that's one of the red flags that caused Dane Wigington, which is the gentleman who is the head of the geoengineeringwatch.org, who also produced the movie The Dimming. I strongly suggest everybody watch that movie if you don't understand the concepts that we're presenting today. Take a look at that, because he was in the solar business, and I believe he also put solar panels in his home because he was living off grid, and he was seeing that there was a discrepancy, that there wasn't the amount of electricity being produced from his solar panels that he wanted, or that he needed, or that it should have, been acquired, but he was not getting it. So he started going down that rabbit hole and finding out, why is this happening? And then he realized that they were spraying over, and that created the dimming. And then that led him into exploring and getting experts to testify, even in Congress, that this was what was happening. But anyway, they do spray all kinds of different particles in the air. That what is happening in terms of, we're going to go right back into why this is a terraforming situation. They're spraying things like aluminum oxide, barium, strontium. All these particles are in the air, and just because of gravity, they fall.
Yep.
And where do they fall? Pretty much everywhere.
Everywhere. Trees,
Yep.
humans, our water supply, animals.
That's right. That's right. We're breathing it in.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking it in, in our food. Again, those people who think that, again, they're consuming organic food and paying more for organic food
Mm-hmm.
because they're not sprayed for pesticides, perhaps, but they have other products on there, other toxins in there that, they're not labeled that way. Hey, this one has, how they're labeling bioengineered foods. Well, this one doesn't say, oh, by the way, it's got geoengineering byproducts on there. There's no
Right.
label that says that. So we're consuming that. And so, yes, it's creating a lot of different health issues. We're taking in metals besides aluminum,
Yes.
other metals that are nanoparticles that are part of the transhumanism, engineering, or parts that we need in order to become transhumanists.
Well,
And that's a problem.
they have found aluminum in the brains of seniors with Alzheimer's, particles of aluminum.
Right.
They used to put it in women's deodorant.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden, they took that out. Well, this is something that happened to me a few times whenever I would fly. You know how they do a wand and they check your body down to be
yeah.
sure you're not hiding anything? The
Yeah.
alarm would always go off at my shoulders and armpits.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. And I thought, why is this? Why is this?
Wow.
And I thought, do I have metal in my body? So that was several years ago. That was before they took the aluminum out of deodorant. And I wonder if that was the cause.
Bet you it was.
Because obviously I'm just standing there, with clothes on, no metal objects whatsoever, everything else gone, no shoes on, and the wand is going off for a metal. And sometimes they would check me a couple of times, like, what's going on here? And so I just wonder sometimes, for people that might have used a specific kind of deodorant that, had heavy amounts in it, if it's embedded into your skin somehow.
I betcha.
Scary
Very
stuff.
scary, very scary. Yeah, back in the day, I mean, I always kind of knew that that aluminum had some kind of an effect with bringing on Alzheimer's, but I thought it was because we were cooking with aluminum pots, or maybe drinking from aluminum cans, or that kind of thing. But never did I think that it was due to particles falling in the air, in the air that's falling on your food and on your drinking water and all that. So, I mean, it's falling in all types of surfaces. And so that's a problem. But another problem, of course, is the fact that because the sun is dimming, then we have a situation where photosynthesis is affected. And when that happens, then we have a dying off of vegetation in general, right? So our vegetation dies. That means that, trees, pine trees and all kinds of gorgeous trees and forests and whatnot, they start dying off. They're also becoming more prone to fires. And then we have failing crops. Then that affects our food supply. And once we have all this aluminum and barium and all these other particles falling on the soil, that's contaminating the soil. The trees are actually absorbing these toxins and also dying from the inside out as well. So they're just dying off like that too. So then that affects all the ecosystem, right? The entire ecosystem, because there are animals that are depending on eating, foraging, like deer and other animals that eat the plants, and there are other animals that eat them. And so it affects everything.
I
So
mean,
it's
the bees
the
that
bees.
pollinate the
Yeah,
flowers,
that's
uh,
right.
all of that really does limit our food supply. And just to prove what you say is absolutely true, I did an unintentional experiment, and it shows me that everything you say is exactly the truth. I love solar gardens, where you
Hmm.
get these little solar things like butterflies and little lanterns, and it absorbs the sun during the day. And then at dusk, it comes on and lights up your little garden. So I've always loved that. Well, I had one about 15 years ago, I guess. And I remember every evening I loved to be sitting out on the porch and to look up at my garden and see the little lanterns come on. They always came on at a certain time. Well, when I got up in the morning, they were still on, and they would
Oh.
slowly, fade as the sunlight came up. Well, a year ago, I did a solar garden here. Do you know that not once has that light lasted all night long? I mean, in fact, like today's an overcast day, so it won't absorb anything, so it won't come on at all. But even on days with full sunlight, and it would come on at nighttime. If I got up to go to the bathroom or had to get up early for an appointment, it's always been off. So, and I've got like 9 or 10 of them. So I'm thinking, well, it doesn't even have enough to last the night now. Now, what's going on?
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, I think that these particles are just getting worse.
Oh, absolutely.
I think they're getting worse. And, that's very disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like, again, if all these life forms that are depending on plants, because everything depends on everything. I mean, it's symbiotic. Everything on the planet is done to perfection. It's so intelligent the way it was designed, where everything depends on everything. Like, for example, this is an aside, I used to do aquaponics. I don't know if you're familiar with that,
Mm,
but
no, tell me about that. I'm not
okay.
quite sure.
Okay, so aquaponics is when you're raising fish like tilapia, for example, in a tank, to give you an example. And that water is then taken up and then it irrigates the plants that you're going to, the vegetation that you're going to grow, like for eating, like microgreens and other things. So the reason you're using that water, the fish water, is because it's rich in all kinds of things like nitrates and nitrites and all kinds of, organisms and stuff that the plants need in order to grow. So all the vitamins, it's rich in all this stuff. And so you grow amazing, lush, gardens, of food. And then, so when that water goes through the plant and through that soil, it comes down and it's clean for the fish tank. So it's symbiotic. Everything is recycled and repurposed. Okay, so it's very intelligent. So it's the same thing. If you take that as a microcosm, you take it into the macrocosm of what our world is like, the biology, the ecosystems, and how everything works intelligently with each other. That's the same thing. Everything is needed for the purpose of something else. So when you are killing something off, for example, the photosynthesis necessary for plants to grow, that's going to eliminate a lot of organisms that depend on that vegetation. And so when you eliminate that, so those creatures that are depending on that vegetation now die off. And so the creatures now that depended on those creatures that ate the vegetation die off. So you have a massive die off. The planet just completely dies. And
Oh
what's that good
gosh.
for? What's that good for? Well, that would be an alien life form that may not need that kind of, life form on a planet. They don't need vegetation. They don't need water. They don't need trees. They don't need anything like that. What kind of life form could that be? Gee, I don't know. It could be, I don't know, reptilian.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah. Or it could be synthetic life form, which doesn't mean reptilians are not synthetic as well, or half synthetic or part synthetic. But, I'm thinking, AI. I'm talking about transhumanism, AI. If you're an AI, if you are a transhuman being already, you're mostly robotic, synthetic. Why do you need trees? Why do you need air, clean air? Why do you need water? You don't. You're living in that virtual world that you're creating. Hey, you might have oceans, but they're all synthetic. They're all virtual. So I'm thinking, my goodness, they're pushing this transhumanist AI thing quickly, and just pay attention. All you got to do is pay attention to what their propaganda is, what the marketing thing is, what the newest thing is. And you'll see that that's what they're gearing towards. So if they're killing off the planet that is organic into something more inorganic and synthetic, they're probably pushing the AI thing very quickly, and or it's an invasion from an external thing, like an alien type of being or beings. So
I agree with you because I have found out there is a whole other world underground.
yeah.
We've all heard that reptilians live deep within the earth in the cave system. Most people don't realize that we have an extensive underground network all across the United States and other countries. We have secret military bases. I have a friend who personally was taken into one of these platforms. It was in California. He went with a military colonel. When he went down there, he was totally flabbergasted. It was as far as his eye could see, miles and miles.
Hmm.
This was in the 90s, and they had technologies that the United States is just embracing now. They've had these things for a long time, but of course, they don't share them, but
Yeah.
they had the communication devices where you basically can call someone up and you can see them standing in front of you, which is like
Like a hologram.
the hologram technology. They
Mhm.
did that back in the 90s. They were growing their food hydroponically,
Yep.
producing all their own foods. Of course, they weren't taking the food from the surface because they know it's contaminated.
Exactly.
They're very self sufficient. So if anything happened on the top side, that they wouldn't have to worry. But they continuously get other supplies, some medical supplies and different things like that. They still get things, like that they might need, but the majority of their stuff they produce. They have malls down there. They have big storage areas. They have big areas of water, fresh water and stuff. So don't you wonder, why do they have this?
Sure. Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to get a membership there. Do you, Eric?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if that I would want
Me
to be honest
either.
with you, because I don't I don't think I really like the element that's down there. But I know that there's a lot of movie stars that have their own bunkers and their own little pads, they're all furnished and everything. I guess it's the emergency, place to go in the event that stuff happens at the surface, which of course they're all creating to get rid of course, the useless eaters that are on the surface. So yeah, very interesting times we're living in for sure.
Well, I think they have done this before. I think these things have happened on this planet before.
Yep.
I bet you probably heard about a place it's let's say a town of province in Turkey,
Oh,
in a
yes.
town called Derinkuyu,
Mm-hmm.
extending to a depth of 5 to 9 miles, and it's large enough to have sheltered 20,000 people, plus their livestock and food stores and churches and everything underground and preserved. So, how did they do this over 100 years ago?
Exactly.
They didn't have bulldozers. They didn't have all the modern technology that we would have, but they did this on their own. It may even be older than 100 years. I don't know. I didn't research that part, but why would they have a multi-level underground city? Why would they do that unless something toxic was going on above ground, or they expected they might be attacked? I mean, we just don't know, but I feel like, yeah, we're just continuing to do what we have in the past to protect the human race. And I know this for a fact. They are already terraforming on Mars. Have you heard about things that they're doing on Mars?
I'm aware of it, but I'm not too familiar with all the details.
Well, they do have underground cities on Mars because the weather is very harsh up there at nighttime. It's extremely cold, so they have developed a big series of underground facilities. Our military is already there. Um, that information came out in the 90s. So they're already up there. And the other thing that I've heard is that they have started trying to create oxygen. I mean, you can breathe for a small amount of time on the surface, but they're trying to increase the oxygen on Mars. And also, they were doing an experiment to try to do that on the moon as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that is exactly what you said. They're trying to acclimate the climate so that it will support whatever life form wants to take residence there.
Yeah,
So just really, that's scary stuff.
that is. The other scary stuff along with what you're saying is that it's very possible, and there's a good amount of evidence that Mars was a full-fledged civilization at one point, and who knows what caused it to be the way it is now. I'm guessing that if you have the type of individuals that are running the planet Earth now, running the planet Mars back then, and they started doing their geoengineering shenanigans, more than likely they messed up the planet as well. I mean, there's a lot of theories with what happened to Mars, because there's evidence that there are different statues and monoliths and things there. So it looks like there was a civilization there at one point, canals and things like that. So what happened to it?
Well, I got some insight on that. This was
Good.
heard from a whistleblower in a book that I haven't put out yet, but this whistleblower told me that an alien life force attacked one of Mars' moons and with nuclear weapons.
That makes sense.
And this nuclear fallout fell onto Mars. Other forces came in and they got rid of the extraterrestrials that were, doing damage to the moon. But in the meantime, it damaged the surface of Mars because scientists have actually said that they found evidence of some kind of nuclear fallout hundreds of thousands of years ago. And so that really makes sense. So if they
Yeah.
had a viable planet with life forms and statues, and we've all seen the face on Mars,
Mm-hmm.
then what would they have done? They would have started going underground to protect themselves.
Good point. Yeah.
So, I mean, I have no reason to doubt, about that, but it sure is a possibility since some of the scientific evidence does relate to nuclear fallout. And gosh, we're in danger of that every day. I mean, look
Oh,
at Fukushima.
that's right.
And that's really scary. I mean, what's that doing to our planet? I've heard, that the waters and stuff that Japan was releasing some of the toxic stuff into the ocean.
Mm-hmm. And that
And
stuff was coming over our side here in California and stuff, right?
oh, yes,
Yeah.
because when I lived in Washington, they actually tested some of the seafood and they found traces of radiation in the food. I haven't ate seafood since then. I haven't. I'm concerned that it might be toxic,
Mm-hmm.
So, they know that nuclear waste and stuff needs to be taken care of and to do something with it where it won't leak back into the ground, but they don't do it. I mean, look at fracking.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how is it they frack? They dig a hole, basically, they drill down and they inject water to free the oil and the natural gases trapped in between some of the plates. Okay. So this water is exuded at extreme force to get, the gas and the oil. So what do? That water that they get back out of it is highly contaminated. And they found out that between 3 to 5 miles around every fracking area that the water is contaminated. They continue to do it though.
They don't care.
They don't care because their greed means more to them. So, and the other thing I found out that Texas, they have had more earthquakes in the area where they do the largest production of extracting oil
Uh-huh.
in that area than any other places in Texas. And what they're saying is sometimes that water injected shifts the tectonic plates,
Of course. Yeah.
and that would make an earthquake. And this year, North Carolina alone has had over 20 earthquakes. Several other states have reported these earthquakes too. So, you know, they know that this is doing damage, but like you say, they don't care.
No, they don't. They don't. So with Mars, going back to that, I'm just wondering if your source mentioned that the people, the inhabitants of Mars at that point, when before the actual situation with the fallout, they went supposedly underground. Do you know if there were any military people of ours that are there now? Have they
Yes,
encountered have they encountered any of these civilization like alive, not just structures and stuff underneath? Have they encountered any Martians down there? Do you know?
yes,
They have.
yes. Here's what I
Interesting.
know.
Okay.
And even when you were talking about that, that was giving me chills. I forget I know this information, but first of all, Mars is about, let's see, Mars is about half the size of the Earth, okay? All right. But there are other civilizations underground. I've heard definitely there are Martians, and these Martians are a hybrid of humans and other races because my whistleblower met one of them and
Oh,
he looked
interesting.
human,
Uh-huh.
except for his ears looked different. His ears were a little different. He said he called this individual the pilot because when he met him, um, his father was helping to work on his vehicle. He had a problem with his flying saucer, so to speak. And we had a secret base in North Carolina. And so that's how he met the pilot. But anyway, through all the conversations they had, my whistleblower guessed what planet he was from. He said, I bet you're from Mars. And so the pilot smiled at him. He said, well, I'm not supposed to tell you that. But this one looked humanoid. The other race that has a very dominant presence there are reptilians.
Oh gosh, they're everywhere, aren't they?
Yes.
They need to
And
stop.
they do. There's a very large presence of reptilians. They were already underground anyway, is what I heard. And he said there were 3 or 4 other races, but he didn't know offhand what they were because he hadn't been told about them by the pilot, so he couldn't speculate on that. The only ones the pilot mentioned were the reptilians. So our people went up there. I know for sure in the 90s. And how do I know? Because a colonel who confided in a friend of mine sent a picture of one of the entrances to the underground base, what it looks like. It looks like a big rock.
Mm-hmm.
You know how these yards will have wells in their yard and they have this big fake rock,
Yeah.
to cover the openings so they, won't mow over it. It looks like that, except it has a door. But if you looked at it from overhead, it would just look like a big rock.
Yeah.
Well, the colonel sent him several pictures of these entrances, and we can see some of them. They have amateur photographers, and the ones that have those gigantic telescopes, they have picked up stuff like this. Plus, we have seen monoliths on Mars. We have seen, I think it was a tunnel system. It showed a tunnel system, and it looked like a tube, where like some type of train transportation or a bullet shaped object was traveling on the surface. So I have no doubt that Mars has already been terraformed. And I think the reason why that we are doing it is because they don't expect, I think they want to destroy Earth, whoever it is,
Yeah.
because they're doing these things intentional. I still see chemtrails, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I had a lush garden this summer. It was one of the first times that I actually went with a full intention of growing, food. And I was until the chemtrail started and then the heat. I mean, it was one of the really very hot summers that I can, remember. And so all my garden kind of died. But yeah,
Mine did
that's,
horrible, hardly
yeah,
no tomatoes,
yeah.
just a few, and the cucumbers did awful. The only thing that thrived was green peppers and things like that. I've got all the green peppers anybody could ever want. I've been giving them away, but
Yeah,
nothing else really did good
mine
because of
either.
the heat.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the chemtrails, coming over. I mean, it's like I'm always thinking, well, the only way to really grow anything would be in a greenhouse type of situation.
Right.
But if they're manipulating the weather, which they are, and we have hailstorms, then say goodbye to your greenhouse.
I know that seems almost impossible to do, and I'm very thankful that I live close to a lot of farmers that plant their own crops and stuff, but still, I know there's some amount of chemtrails on them because I see the chemtrails, here, and I'm within a 10-mile radius. So I wash them as good as I can, not under my tap water. I get distilled water to watch things like that. I do
Oh
not
yeah.
drink the water here. So I
Yeah.
make sure that I wash everything as good as I can. And like you say, even if it says organic, it still had the fallout,
It's got to
unless it
keep.
was in a greenhouse. But then there's a possibility it was in the water system
That's
that
right.
watered the stuff in the
Yeah.
greenhouses. So,
Exactly. Yeah. And then remember that plants need water, so they're taking that stuff in to their system. And then you're eating the flesh of that fruit or the vegetable or whatever. So you're taking it in also.
Right. And plus, they're geoengineering the food,
Yeah.
putting all kinds of weird stuff in it. And, all it's doing is diminishing our food source. And I think you're probably too young to remember this, but do you remember growing up? Did your parents ever talk about the Dust Bowl?
I know of it, but my parents did not talk about it. But yes, I do know about it.
Okay. That was a name given to, let's see, the drought-stricken plains on a region in the United States that had severe dust storms during a drought that they had in the 1930s. And what had happened was they had so many high winds and choking dust, because it was so dry that the people and livestock were killed, crops failed across the entire region. What happened is they planted a lot of crops, but what they didn't do is they didn't alternate the crops. They're supposed to take care of it, not plant the same things in one area, rotate and do all that. They overplanted. They kept on basically raping the soil to produce stuff until nothing would grow anymore. No crops would grow. And so the erosion affected, I think my dad said it was 100 million acres.
Holy cow.
And I had watched a documentary one time that people had to go out, they had to tie rags around their face and cover their mouth. And if they drove their cars too far, the sand got into the engines and choked up their motors. They had to board up their windows. They had no sun. They couldn't plant anything. So that was something that the United States learned a very valuable lesson from: the greed.
Yeah.
The greed to produce the crops, and them not using the conversation, them not using the conservation that they needed, like rotating the plants and all this other stuff. That's what they did, and it totally desolated the whole area and a lot of people. The Great Depression was a horrible thing. People, gosh, they didn't have food. I mean, they were rationed, with what little food they got. And, we've already seen some of the rationing of food right now in some countries.
Oh yeah, and that's going to happen here because bugs are not geoengineered, so
Right.
those are safe to eat.
Oh my
Oh
God,
my
that's
God.
horrible. That's
Yeah,
horrible.
you're going to have to get used to it. Yeah.
And with the fracking poisoning the groundwater and threatening wildlife, I mean, is it not a sad shame how much of the Amazon has been destroyed
Again, by design. Everything's by design.
by design?
There's nothing that is of a nefarious act that is happening that is not by design, not intentional, as it hasn't been written down somewhere. And it's being checked off right now as like task completed, and it's my personal opinion about the Georgia Guidestones that they were taken down, obviously, by the opposition, by the actual ones that put them there, because they don't need to keep that and as part of their tasks to do, because they're already doing it. It's already in we're already in it. And just as an aside, because we're speaking about water as well, I used to be a Berkey water retailer. I used to have a website and sold it. Don't do it anymore, but I strongly do recommend, if anybody can still get one, to do so. Berkey water purifiers will filter out pretty much everything. It's a 99.9% effective with everything, including cryptosporidium, which is one of the bacteria that they're putting in the water right now. The cabal is to contaminate our water supply because it gets people very ill to the point of, death.
And I think it was supposed to take out fluoride too.
It does have an extra little filter that you can add to it that takes out the fluoride. And again, I've owned one for a very long time. I don't know if they've made one filter for everything, but the one that I have, you can attach that extra little filter, which is like a white filter that will get rid of the fluoride. So, I mean, this is a lifesaver, and I know of it because I know that the military used to take it into third world countries. People that are, have, even if you were to take it into a pond or a cesspool of just garbage water, it would filter it out where it's clean and pure. You can drink it. So if anybody can get a hold of one, yeah, I would strongly recommend you get it, because I think they're flying off the shelves, and I don't even know, sometimes the suppliers can't keep it. I couldn't keep it on my shelf.
Oh, wow.
So,
Well,
yeah.
that's something good to know, and we'll try to find a link for that and post that on our site. Well, I do want to talk about this. I know we've only got about 15 minutes because the time just really flies when we're talking. I mean, this is good stuff. Have you heard about artificial suns?
Yes.
Okay. This is like unreal, and it's so bizarre. Okay. There's a geoengineering startup company called Make Sunsets. Okay. They have begun deploying massive weather balloons. Okay. Why? To blast the stratosphere with reflective sulfur particles, all in the name of they're fighting climate change.
Yeah.
So these sulfur blasts will stop the sun's ultraviolet rays from reaching the atmosphere and ultimately our Earth's surface. And so, once again, what does this do? Dims the sun that no longer functions as it was designed to keep us alive and to grow our crops.
Yep.
Okay. So, this is much like how when we have volcanic eruptions, you know, how it floods the skies with pollutants and darkens, for days and weeks. And what happens is everything dies in that area, gets contaminated. Okay. So they have been doing numerous test launches already taking place in Mexico with these balloons with no public input or scientific debate. So they're trying to do this to commercialize the technology for widespread use. But Germany's not going to be undone because they are unveiling something known as the world's first artificial sun. Now, think about it. On one hand, they're trying to dim the sun, but now they're trying to create an artificial sun. So, what are they doing with this artificial sun? Okay. Now, first of all, this is their name for their project. SYNLIGHT, Sin Light. Sin Light. Okay. So they're trying to use that to produce a system that will create natural sunlight so they can produce hydrogen fuel. So what they do with this is they'll focus it on an area that, say they can take an area 20 by 20 centimeters, they can make the temperature go up to 3,000 degrees Celsius.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes. So this process will help researchers, they say, produce 10,000 more times the amount of solar radiation that would typically shine on an equivalent size surface. So, the sun shines, and that's what makes solar work, is these sun rays. They're saying they can do it and focus it, and it be thousands of times hotter than the sun. But we got one more player here, China. China has spent $1 trillion. $1 trillion, and they've already tested it. Okay, they call this project ITER, which is International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. And So listen to this. Now, what could go wrong?
Nothing.
They're using the world's most powerful magnet that's able to produce a magnetic field 280,000 times stronger than the Earth's own field. And this
Okay.
reactor is expected to run in 2025.
So we got what, 2 years?
Two
Or
two
less? Less,
years.
because we're almost done with 23. Oh my God.
2 years. I mean, I'm thinking, oh my God. And so, but the catch 22 is, NASA released that on Mars, they're planning on releasing chlorofluorocarbons into the Martian atmosphere because even though greenhouse gases were used as refrigerants, propellants, and solvents, they say on Mars, since it's colder there, that it will actually benefit Mars and it will boost the global retention of radiation and will increase the atmosphere there. So, what was poison to us, they're going to do up there. So, to me, Ari, they're just polluting the other planet.
Oh, they're going to pollute the cosmos. You see, if this strange virus, which, I don't know who is the controlling factor or factors that are making these decisions without any votes, without any consultation with the real scientists, that element, those factions that are probably, combination of off-world people, they need to be stopped. I mean, like ASAP, because they're going to contaminate the other worlds, the other planets, the cosmos. Why aren't the Martians, there are Martians underground, why aren't they stopping this element from going over and deciding that they're going to be terraforming their world? I just don't understand for the life of me. I really don't.
I don't either. And plus, we forget, we've had the introduction of nanotechnology.
Yeah.
And they're using that to assault not only products on the earth, but our bodies with that little thing that you got censored for, that we had, that they
Yeah.
tried to make people do and take. They use nanotechnology in that. So that is basically terraforming our human bodies and making changes that are not good.
No.
I mean, besides causing the death of no telling how many people, actually changing our DNA. Our DNA. So that all goes back to what you talk about. We have to think about this. So this planet is being terraformed. Who's going to be able to stay on it? I agree. I think that robots or an artificial intelligence or aliens have higher odds of humans because robots don't need breath. They don't need food or medicine. And aliens, some of them don't breathe oxygen. And I know that most of them can't stand the sunlight.
Right.
In fact, alien greys wear eye shields. And why? My whistleblower said their planet has 3 suns. So when they go out into the light, they practically can't see. So they adapted by creating these eye shields, just like how we put on sunglasses when we go out. Now, I have green eyes. I'm very sensitive to strong sunlight. And I have to wear these eyeglasses. So I totally believe that these grays would have to wear something to shield their eyes. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So are they terraforming this planet for themselves?
Good question. It's
I,
it's definitely somebody.
well, I
For
can't
sure.
think, they're still doing the chemtrails, they're doing all these toxic things, the fracking, the all the chemicals and weed killers and all of this stuff that they put. The United States was one of the last ones to banish some of these weed killers. Other countries did it almost immediately, but we still had to endure with it, with Monsanto. I mean, they're still settling lawsuits now,
Wow.
for using this on not only the crops, but our animals ate the crops, so they got contaminated. We ate the animals, then we got contaminated. So the question is, who's trying to knock us off, Ari?
Probably a whole bunch of different individuals with different agendas.
Well, I agree. It gives us something to think about, but our time is almost up. I do want to mention a future show that we're going to be having in a month or so. And Ari and I are so excited about this. I'm so excited. It's about miracles. So, what I want to ask all our listeners out there, do you have a 5 to 10 minute story to tell us about your miracle? Message us and we will record a short clip and we'll air it on our show about miracles. And you can contact Ari on the links below. We also have the Beacon Podcast Facebook page. I posted the ad on there. Contact us, let us know, because I totally know that miracles exist. There's miracles every day, and you've already heard from people wanting to share their story, haven't you?
Yeah, several people actually.
I know, so it just runs all over me. I'm so excited about this show because we love to do the positive too.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope that everybody will contact us, because a miracle is something that is not supposed to be hidden. It gives hope, it inspires, and it can actually keep somebody from committing suicide. When you hear how they struggled to hold on and they got through it and they're okay. So, yeah, everybody, if you've got a story, contact either Ari or myself, and I'll put up our links below. So, this show has ended. Ari, we can go bake cookies now, or whatever us grandmas do when we're not calling out aliens and bad guys.
That's right.
So please like, subscribe, and share our podcast. All the links are below. And Ari, thank you so much for all of your information. You are always such a blessing to me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being a voice again in the wilderness along with me. And I appreciate you having me on the show.
And everybody check out Ari's book. She is a best-selling author. The links are below, and we'll see you guys again in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Deborah Jane East and Ari Kopel on the Beacon Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to Rumble, BitChute, and YouTube to catch our next episode.